In 2003, a group of men in Australia grew out their mustaches during the month of November. They noticed that their stashes were quite the conversation starters, so they took the opportunity to talk about men's health. Thus, Movember was born. The organization has only continued to grow, even becoming popular right here in the United States. Mustaches with a purpose. It's this mission that got Executive Director Mark Hedstrom involved with Movember, who lost his friend to pancreatic cancer in 2005. Hedstrom tells me that Movember made him more comfortable talking about health with other men, like his father, who suffered from depression.
I really do think that that particular incident in my life early on, losing that friend and then joining Movember and understanding I needed to make a change with how I engaged my father and his mental health issues, has really changed and did change our relationship over those years we had left.
And it's stories like these that have made Movember the face of men's health for almost 2 decades.
There wasn't a lot of conversation around men's health, particularly at that time, focusing on prostate cancer. So in 2004, we started fundraising against prostate cancer and getting men to grow mustaches in Australia and New Zealand. And then in 2007, we went to 20 other markets around the world.
According to the CDC, prostate cancer is the most common form of cancer in American men. South Carolina's Department of Health numbers predict that more than 5,000 men in the Palmetto State will be diagnosed with prostate cancer this year. Movember also raises money for testicular cancer and men's mental health and suicide prevention. According to the CDC, in 2020, men's suicide rates were 4 times higher than women.
What we realized in that is that men are struggling to have those conversations, the vocabulary, not being aware of some of the issues or challenges that we face as men, and then not having the place or space to have those conversations or the vocabulary to actually engage.
A report the Palmetto State Teachers Association released this week showed scathing statistics in South Carolina when it comes to teachers, with more than 5,300 of them leaving the profession in the last year. More than a third of those departures in the last 5 years have been teachers with 5 or fewer years of experience.
We've got to reverse that trend and give every student access to a high-quality teacher, and that starts with addressing working conditions for our state's educators.
Patrick Kelly of the PSTA detailing the organization's demands in this 2023 legislative agenda. It includes increasing the starting salary for teachers to $50,000 a year and extending the 6 weeks of paid family leave the General Assembly approved earlier this year to teachers.
So instead of taking time without pay, they walk away from the profession so they can raise their own child.
Citing the average teacher salary in South Carolina is at least $15,000 less than what it typically costs them to keep their classrooms running. It's why they want to see smaller class sizes and more training and support for disciplining students.
In South Carolina, you can be a 5th grade teacher and have 35 students in a classroom. You're not doing a lot of instruction, you're doing a lot more of effectively babysitting.
Issues they're hopeful newly elected Superintendent of Education Ellen Weaver will tackle, alongside lawmakers like Annie McDaniel, who belong to the House Education and Public Works Committee.
I think the problem is going to come with the balance. It all involves money.
What does that figure look like?
But I can tell you it's probably astronomical. I think it's going to take years to fix. We just got to keep chiseling it.
The laws that protect our state's rivers and waters could also be putting them at risk. The state's Surface Water Withdrawal Act manages most protections of South Carolina's waters, but in the past decade, that act has been called into question.
We've had 10 years to see how it works within South Carolina's regulatory system. And we've unfortunately seen examples where it doesn't work.
Environmental groups like Upstate Forever filed a notice of intent to sue the highest environmental authority in the land, the Environmental Protection Agency. In that suit, they allege the EPA had a duty to review South Carolina's law and find whether they approved of it. Turns out they didn't. In a letter written to DHEC and the state's Attorney General's office, the EPA alleged that the state's water laws did not satisfy the Clean Water Act. The EPA even went a step further to say that the laws were not based on sound science.
There were a few regulatory definitions that were in keeping with the best available science. There were some that weren't, but compromises had to be made to make sure the legislation passed.
3 parts of South Carolina's law were called into question: how much water is flowing, how much water there is, and how much can be taken out, claiming that business and industry were valued more than protecting the water.
This is about making sure we have enough water left in our rivers for everyone, not just one industry group.
EPA's biggest concern was with what's known as the safe yield provision. As the law is written, too much water could be taken out of a water body at certain times of the year. According to the EPA's letter, the safe yield will not be available for more than half of the time.
So it's actually allowed users to withdraw more water on paper than what actually exists.
The consequences could damage water both upstream and downstream. DHEC responded to the EPA saying, while DHEC disagrees with some of the EPA's findings, we will still take actions to meet with stakeholders around the state who are impacted by surface water laws and regulations.
I think we're in a good position to update our regulations and that regulatory framework so that we have a more protective framework.
EPA requested these changes be made in DHEC's triennial review, but the agency did not think the timing would work. The solution will likely be found at the State House. House Speaker Myrtle telling Watch Fox News, quote, "Protecting South Carolina's resources is vital to our prosperity. I am always interested in finding ways to protect and preserve natural resources in the state." For now, a group with representatives from several agencies is working on changing the regulations.